In the history of professional wrestling, there have been countless blockbuster moves between WWF and WCW, with stars expected to shine just as brightly, if not brighter, in their new home. But not everyone was able to replicate their past success. Some names that once dominated in WWF ended up fading into the background in WCW, with their runs even being considered failures. Today, we'll look back at some of the most notable cases. Wrestlers who were once celebrated in WWF but struggled to recapture their former glory in WCW. 1. Bret "Hitman" Hart. Bret Hart, famously known as the Excellence of Execution, nearly jumped ship to WCW much earlier, with rumors suggesting he was even considered to be the mysterious third man during the legendary New World Order debut at Bash at the Beach 1996. However, Hart chose to stay loyal to WWF, signing a 20-year deal that Vince McMahon had promised him. When Vince could no longer honor that deal, everything unraveled, leading to the infamous Montreal Screwjob in 1997, which effectively ended Hart's relationship with WWF. When WCW announced Bret Hart's signing, it was seen as the biggest acquisition since the company brought in Hulk Hogan in 1994. Hart was a main event caliber star, a true WWF icon, and fans expected him to be the game-changer in the Monday Night Wars. But from his very first appearance at Starrcade 1997, things went off track. Hart was placed in the front row and suddenly got involved in the WCW title match between Sting and Hollywood Hogan. He knocked out referee Nick Patrick, claiming Patrick had made a fast count, except the fast count never actually happened. This awkward moment made Hart's debut feel flat and confusing. Backstage rumors later suggested that Hogan had changed the finish, throwing the entire storyline into disarray. In the following months, Hart feuded with Ric Flair and later joined the NWO, by then an overstuffed faction that was already losing its edge. Despite winning 2 WCW World Heavyweight Championships, 4 United States titles, and 1 Tag Team Championship, Hart's WCW run is largely remembered as a disappointment. His title feuds often lacked drama, and the creative direction failed to showcase his trademark technical precision that made Hitman so iconic. One of the few bright spots from this era was Hart's emotional match against Chris Benoit, dedicated to Owen Hart, and the clever Toronto Maple Leaf steel plate moment where Goldberg speared himself into oblivion. Sadly, Goldberg's stiff kick to the head not long after effectively ended Bret Hart's in-ring career, closing the book on one of WCW's most frustrating and tragic chapters. 2. Earthquake. John Tenta, known to WWF fans in the early 90s as Earthquake, was once a terrifying force in professional wrestling. With his massive frame, surprising speed for his size, and his signature Earthquake splash, he quickly became one of the most intimidating monsters Hulk Hogan ever faced. Every time Earthquake appeared, WWF crowds erupted with excitement, and he was involved in several high-profile rivalries that cemented him as an unforgettable figure of that golden era. However, things didn't go as planned when Tenta jumped to WCW. At first, he was introduced as Avalanche, a massive enforcer in the villainous Dungeon of Doom faction, whose main purpose was to take down Hulk Hogan. But WCW soon faced legal pressure from WWF, claiming the name Avalanche was too similar to Earthquake. This forced the company to rebrand him, and they chose a very odd direction, turning him into the Shark, a half-man, half-shark character complete with shark fin patterns on his wrestling gear. This gimmick not only failed to excite the audience but also stripped away the fearsome presence Tenta once had. Eventually, he was given a name closer to his original, but the constant changes left fans disconnected from the character. Instead of being seen as a dominant threat, Tenta was relegated to filling spots in tag matches or being used to make other stars look strong. Poor character direction and weak storylines turned Earthquake, once a nightmare-inducing force in WWF, into a forgotten name in WCW. In the end, Tenta left the company, closing the chapter on what is remembered as one of the most lackluster runs of his otherwise remarkable career. 3. Sunny. Tammy Sytch, better known to wrestling fans as Sunny, was once credited with ushering in a new era for female personalities in WWF. With her captivating looks, bright smile, and natural charisma, Sunny became more than just a skilled manager. She turned into professional wrestling's first true sex symbol. Even when portraying a heel, she electrified the crowd every time she appeared, elevating the careers of the wrestlers she managed and helping them reach new heights. At the peak of her popularity, Sunny was famously dubbed the most downloaded woman on the internet, proving that her influence extended far beyond the ring. However, the spotlight didn't last forever. The arrival of Sable gradually shifted the focus away from Sunny, and behind-the-scenes issues began to surface. Rumors of her missing key events and ongoing backstage drama hurt her standing with the company. By 1998, WWF officially released her, closing the chapter on one of the brightest runs of the 90s. Still passionate about wrestling, Sunny had a short stint in ECW before heading to WCW. She debuted at Spring Stampede 2000, playing a key role in helping her real-life boyfriend, Chris Candido, capture the Cruiserweight Championship. Following that, she became involved in a feud with Paisley and teamed with Candido in matches against Crowbar and Daphne. Unfortunately, Sunny's WCW run never lived up to its potential. The storylines written for her failed to make an impact, and her personal issues once again became a hurdle. Reports of backstage conflicts ultimately led WCW to release her after only a brief stay. Sunny's time in WCW is often remembered as a missed opportunity, a clear case of talent being wasted when not given the right platform to shine. 4. The Big Boss Man. Ray Traylor, a real-life correctional officer, transformed his personal experience into the character of the Big Boss Man, one of the most memorable villains of WWF's golden era. Possessing a powerful physique yet surprising agility in the ring, Boss Man quickly became a top-tier threat. Early in his career, he drew attention by facing Hulk Hogan and even defeating him on an episode of the Brother Love Show, sending the message that not even Hulk Hogan is above the law. Later, Boss Man teamed up with Akeem to form the Twin Towers, taking on Hogan and Randy Savage's mega powers. When Hogan and Savage's partnership fractured, Boss Man turned face, becoming a beloved enforcer of justice for the audience. However, his transition to WCW proved rocky. WCW wanted Traylor to maintain a boss man-like persona, but WWF threatened copyright action, forcing a change. Traylor cycled through multiple characters, from the Boss to the Guardian Angel, inspired by a real-life anti-crime volunteer group, then Big Bubba Rogers, joining the Dungeon of Doom, and finally betraying them to align with the NWO. Despite several attempts at storyline development, WCW never fully utilized his potential. He eventually left the NWO, wrestling under his real name, Ray Traylor, before returning to WWF, where Boss Man featured in some memorable storylines, including the Hell in a Kennel match against Al Snow and a feud with Big Show, famously involving the theft of Big Show's father's casket during a funeral segment. Traylor's WCW period, though marked by multiple character shifts, remained lackluster and could never match the heights of his WWF peak. 5. Smash. Barry Darsow was a familiar face in the 1980s wrestling scene, having trained alongside legends such as Nikita Koloff, Rick Rude, Curt Hennig, John Nord, Tom Zenk, and Brady Boone. His career began as Crusher Khrushchev, a villainous character aligned with the Soviet Union, betraying America. During this period, Darsow teamed with Ivan and Nikita Koloff in Jim Crockett Promotions, gradually becoming a nationally recognized talent. The turning point came when he joined WWF, replacing Randy Colley in the Demolition stable and taking on the role of Demolition Smash. Alongside Demolition acts, they became one of WWF's most iconic tag teams, dominating the division with their powerful and aggressive style. After Demolition disbanded, Darsow went solo as Repo Man, a crafty villain known for seizing other wrestlers' belongings. Though he never captured a title, Repo Man left an impression, especially through a brief feud with Randy Macho Man Savage, which included stealing the legendary wrestler's cowboy hat. After leaving WWF, Darsow joined WCW as Blacktop Bully, a hot-tempered trucker. His rivalry with Dustin Rhodes culminated in the King of the Road match at Uncensored 1995, where both battled atop a moving truck. The bout attracted attention but ended bitterly, as both were fired for using the Blade move, which WCW had banned. In 1997, Darsow returned to WCW as Mr. Hole-in-One, an arrogant golfer. When the character failed to connect with audiences, he wrestled under his real name before reverting to Blacktop Bully. Despite experimenting with multiple personas, Darsow could not replicate the immense success he enjoyed as Demolition Smash in WWF, making his WCW tenure a relatively forgettable chapter in his career. 6. Ted DiBiase. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase's in-ring career in WWF came to an end after a severe neck injury during a tour of Japan. Although he could no longer compete, He remained a prominent presence on television as a manager and created one of the most feared heel factions of the mid-1990s, the $1 Million Corporation. Under DiBiase's leadership, the group tormented WWF's top heroes, becoming a constant threat to the company's biggest stars. In 1996, DiBiase left WWF and signed with WCW. He was introduced as Trillionaire Ted, the financial backer and spokesperson for the New World Order, playing the role of the man funding the group's hostile takeover. At first, it was a perfect fit, a wealthy, powerful figure standing behind one of the most infamous stables in wrestling history. But things changed when Eric Bischoff made his shocking on-screen defection to the NWO and inserted himself into the storyline as the faction's leader. In an interview with Wrestling101.com, DiBiase openly admitted he felt pushed aside. Initially, I was hired to be the spokesperson for the group, but as NWO got more popular, Eric decided to take over that role himself. Week by week, he stopped hosting as much and became the face of the NWO. I told Eric I wasn't going to show up just to be Hogan's version of Virgil. If I wasn't going to do what I was contracted to do, then they might as well send me home. Eventually, DiBiase quietly left WCW, though his contract remained valid, and the company was forced to pay him for 3 years despite not using him. His time in WCW is largely remembered as a forgettable chapter, failing to live up to the legacy he built in WWF as the iconic $1 Million Man. 7. Davey Boy Smith. After the infamous Montreal Screwjob in 1997, Davey Boy Smith, better known to fans as the British Bulldog, chose to buy out his WWF contract in search of a fresh start with WCW. He joined the company alongside his former Hart Foundation allies, hoping to remain a top player and prove himself in the heated rivalry between the two biggest wrestling promotions in the world. Unfortunately, Smith's WCW run quickly turned into a major disappointment. Despite his impressive physique, in-ring ability, and international star power, he was rarely booked to his full potential. WCW frequently placed him in lackluster storylines with little importance, making Bulldog's appearances feel forgettable. His time there is often cited as a textbook example of how poor creative direction can waste a top-tier talent. The most devastating moment of Smith's WCW tenure came at Halloween Havoc 1998. In an unscripted accident, he accidentally fell onto a trapdoor hidden beneath the ring, which had been placed there for the Ultimate Warrior's entrance later in the night. The impact caused a severe back injury. What initially seemed like a temporary issue quickly worsened, developing into a serious spinal infection. Smith spent weeks in the hospital, enduring excruciating pain throughout his recovery. Instead of supporting him during this difficult period, WCW coldly terminated his contract, notifying him through a FedEx letter. This decision not only left Smith heartbroken, but also sparked criticism over WCW's treatment of injured wrestlers. What was meant to be a fresh chapter in Smith's career instead became one of its darkest periods, leaving fans with a lingering sense of what could have been had WCW utilized the British Bulldog more effectively. 8. Curt Hennig. Curt Hennig, known to WWF fans as Mr. Perfect, was one of the most complete performers the wrestling industry has ever seen. He was celebrated for his flawless technique, smooth in-ring style, and ability to make any match feel special. During his WWF run, Hennig captured the Intercontinental Championship twice and became iconic thanks to the legendary vignettes showcasing him doing everything perfectly, from sinking basketball shots to hitting golf balls and throwing football passes with effortless precision. When Hennig arrived in WCW in 1997, many believed it was his chance to once again rise to main event status. He entered during a hot period for the company, initially aligning with the Four Horsemen before turning on them to join the NWO. This betrayal became one of WCW's most shocking moments, especially since Hennig was portrayed as the man who ended Arn Anderson's career and effectively caused the Horsemen to fall apart. However, after such a strong debut, WCW failed to maximize Hennig's potential. Instead of establishing him as a cornerstone of the NWO, the company slowly slid him down the card, sticking him in storylines that lacked importance. Although he did win the WCW United States Championship and later the WCW World Tag Team Championship, these title reigns did little to restore him to the top level where many felt he belonged. Hennig was shuffled through various factions, from the NWO Wolfpack to the West Texas Rednecks, a group remembered mostly for the catchy Rap is Crap song. While entertaining, this run locked one of wrestling's greatest technicians into a mostly comedic role. Curt Hennig eventually left WCW with his career feeling stagnant, leaving fans with a sense of disappointment. Many believed he deserved a far bigger spotlight and a run that truly reflected the extraordinary talent he had shown as Mr. Perfect. 9. Marty Jannetty. When fans hear the name Marty Jannetty, most immediately think of him as one half of the legendary tag team The Rockers. But when the team split, Jannetty's career was constantly compared to Shawn Michaels, who went on to become one of WWF's biggest stars. Many labeled Jannetty as the second coming of Jim Neidhart, a talented tag team wrestler who struggled to make a lasting impact as a singles competitor. Right after the Rockers' breakup, Jannetty entered a heated feud with Shawn Michaels, culminating in their match at Royal Rumble 1993. Instead of serving as a springboard for his career, he was released shortly afterward, reportedly for performing under the influence of drugs. Jannetty firmly denied the allegation, insisting he was simply exhausted and even claimed that Michaels exaggerated the situation. Thanks to Curt Hennig's intervention, Jannetty was brought back to WWF. He even had a shining moment when he defeated Shawn Michaels to win the Intercontinental Championship on an episode of Raw, though he dropped the title back to Michaels just weeks later. After that, his momentum stalled. He teamed with the 1-2-3 Kid and later with Al Snow as part of the New Rockers, but neither pairing managed to reignite fan interest. A potential career revival seemed possible when Jannetty signed with WCW in 1998. However, rather than being pushed as a star, he was mostly used to put over other talent, serving as the guy who made his opponents look good. Behind-the-scenes reports also suggested that Jannetty's personal issues, from a lack of discipline to his well-known inner demons, contributed to his decline. While there may be truth to that, it's equally clear that WCW had no real plan for utilizing former WWF talent effectively, and Jannetty ultimately became a prime example of wasted potential. 10. Ahmed Johnson. Tony Norris, better known to fans as Ahmed Johnson, made a powerful impression when he debuted in WWF in 1995. With his massive physique, explosive in-ring style, and high-energy persona, Ahmed was quickly pushed as a rising star. His career peak came at King of the Ring 1996, where he became the first African-American wrestler to win the Intercontinental Championship, a historic milestone that inspired future black talent to chase championship gold. Despite his blazing start, Ahmed's momentum in WWF slowed due to repeated injuries and reported backstage issues. He eventually left the company in late 1999 and signed with WCW, where fans hoped to see his career revitalized. Unfortunately, what followed was a disappointment. Norris was reintroduced as Big T and aligned himself with Stevie Ray, one half of the legendary Harlem Heat, to feud with Booker T. Together, they formed Harlem Heat 2000, promoted as a revamped version of the original team. However, the pairing quickly became the subject of ridicule. Norris had gained considerable weight, which slowed his movement and robbed him of the intimidating presence he once had. Harlem Heat 2000's matches lacked the intensity and chemistry that made the original Harlem Heat so popular, leaving fans underwhelmed. Even the name Harlem Heat 2000 was mocked, viewed as a downgrade rather than an upgrade. Eventually, WCW released Big T, reportedly due to concerns about his conditioning and weight. Instead of reviving his career, his run in WCW only further diminished his star power, marking one of the most unfortunate cases of a promising WWF talent failing to recapture his former glory with a rival promotion. 11. The Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior has always been one of the most polarizing figures in professional wrestling history. Known for his explosive style, boundless energy, and ability to get crowds on their feet the moment his music hit, Warrior was undeniably a main event level star. However, his career was also marred by backstage drama, ranging from contract disputes to his unpredictable behavior, which often frustrated promoters and management. Despite these concerns, WCW decided to bring Warrior in during 1998, immediately placing him in a high-profile feud with Hollywood Hogan and the NWO. The storyline was heavily promoted as a throwback to their legendary WrestleMania 6 clash, where Warrior famously defeated Hogan to become WWF's top star. WCW hoped this rematch would create the same magic and draw massive fan interest. Warrior ended up wrestling only a handful of matches, with the centerpiece being his rematch against Hogan at Halloween Havoc 1998. Unfortunately, the bout turned into a disaster. The in-ring action was disjointed, the finish was executed awkwardly, and the live crowd reacted poorly. Critics tore the match apart, and Wrestling Observer newsletter even named it the worst match of the year. Rumors circulated that Hogan himself pushed for Warrior's signing simply to get his win back from years earlier. In the end, Hogan walked away with the victory, while Warrior was barely used afterward. He made one final appearance on Nitro before disappearing from WCW entirely, though he still collected the full paycheck guaranteed by his contract. Warrior's brief run with WCW is now remembered as one of the most expensive missteps in the company's history, serving as a prime example of how mishandling a legendary figure can turn a blockbuster signing into a wasted opportunity. 12. Jake, the Snake, Roberts. Jake, the Snake, Roberts is widely regarded as one of the greatest psychological minds in professional wrestling. He never needed to yell or overact to grab attention. With just a cold stare, a low, menacing voice, and chilling promos, Jake could captivate an entire arena. Accompanied by his massive python Damien, Roberts turned every WWF appearance into a dramatic moment. His unforgettable feuds with Randy Savage, Rick Rude, and The Undertaker cemented his status as a cornerstone of WWF's golden era. However, when Roberts joined WCW in 1992, his career was not utilized to its full potential. He debuted by delivering his signature DDT and immediately began a high-profile feud with Sting, one of WCW's biggest stars. But what should have been the start of a compelling storyline arc ended far too soon. Their match at that year's Halloween Havoc, expected to kick off a series of intense angles, ended up being the only truly notable bout Roberts had in WCW. Much of this was due to real-life struggles. At the time, Roberts was battling addiction and living a chaotic lifestyle, which clearly affected his in-ring performance. WCW management also seemed hesitant to invest in his character, leaving Jake underused, appearing sporadically, and never regaining the aura he once commanded. Within a short time, Roberts departed WCW, leaving behind a run that felt underwhelming compared to what it could have been. Fans still remember him as a master storyteller and one of wrestling's most brilliant psychological performers, but his WCW stint stands as a prime example of wasted potential. 13. Rick Martel. Rick Martel was one of the true veterans of professional wrestling, having competed in nearly every major promotion across the United States and internationally. He captured the AWA World Heavyweight Championship in the mid-1980s, proving himself as one of the top stars of that era. In WWF, Martel also made a strong impression, winning the WWF Tag Team Championship and delivering memorable performances in both tag team and singles competition. A major turning point in Martel's career came when he reinvented himself as a heel with the model persona. Playing an arrogant character who always carried his signature arrogance spray, Martel became one of the most despised figures on WWF television. While the gimmick drew plenty of boos, it breathed new life into his career and put him back in the spotlight throughout the early 90s. In 1997, Martel signed with WCW and was quickly thrust into a feud with rising star Booker T. His performances impressed both fans and management, and Martel went on to capture the WCW Television Championship, proving he could still hang with the younger generation and had not lost a step in the ring. Unfortunately, Martel's WCW run ended in heartbreaking fashion. During a title defense, his leg became tangled in the ring ropes, causing a devastating injury that resulted in torn ligaments, a broken bone, and damaged cartilage. The incident forced him to immediately step away from competition and derailed WCW's long-term plans for him. Despite undergoing rehabilitation, the severity of the injury ultimately led Martel to retire from professional wrestling. Martel's brief time in WCW remains a what-if moment for many fans. Had it not been for that career-ending injury, he likely could have enjoyed one more successful chapter in an already remarkable career. 14. Virgil. During his WWF run, Virgil was best known as the loyal right-hand man of Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase. He was always by DiBiase's side, ready to interfere and secure victories for his boss, becoming a key part of some of the most memorable storylines of the late 80s and early 90s. The peak of Virgil's career came when he finally turned on DiBiase, defeating him to win the $1 Million Championship in one of the most crowd-pleasing moments of that era. However, when he made the jump to WCW, things went in a completely different direction. Virgil was renamed Vincent and quickly slotted into the NWO, WCW's dominant heel faction. On paper, this seemed like a fresh start, but in practice, Vincent was mostly there to stand in the background while stars like Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall took the spotlight. He was frequently booked to lose, serving as a true jobber whose main purpose was to make others look stronger. To make matters worse, WCW turned Vincent into a comedic character, with both fans and fellow NWO members constantly mocking him. This stripped away any sense of seriousness he once had and turned him into little more than comic relief. His storylines rarely carried weight, and over time, Vincent faded into the background, becoming one of the least relevant members of the roster. Virgil, once responsible for one of WWF's most emotional moments, ended up having a forgettable stint in WCW. Despite standing alongside some of wrestling's biggest names, Vincent was never given the chance to shine, making him a prime example of wasted potential from a character who once had the crowd firmly behind him. 15. Rick Rude. Ravishing Rick Rude was one of the greatest heels in WWF history. With his chiseled physique, iconic mustache, and unmatched ability to antagonize the crowd to the point of madness, Rude turned every appearance into a performance. He became an Intercontinental Champion, engaged in legendary feuds with the Ultimate Warrior and Jake, the Snake Roberts, and cemented his status as a top star. When Rude left WWF and signed with WCW in the early 90s, many believed it would be the place where he'd finally reach the absolute peak of his career. He was given a strong push, joining Paul E. Dangerously's, now Paul Heyman, Dangerous Alliance, and quickly becoming one of the group's cornerstones. Not long after, Rude captured the WCW United States Championship and held it for an extended reign, proving he had all the tools to be a main event player. Sadly, fate had other plans. During a match with Sting in Japan in 1994, Rude suffered a severe back injury. Despite finishing the bout, and even retaining his title in the process, the damage was too great, forcing him to retire from in-ring competition permanently. WCW kept Rude on television in non-wrestling roles, using him as a spokesperson and eventually placing him in the NWO, where his presence added credibility to the faction. Still, without the ability to wrestle, his impact gradually faded. Fans were left wondering what could have been, as many believed Rude had the potential to become a world champion in WCW. Rick Rude's WCW run remains a bittersweet story, full of promise but tragically cut short. He is still remembered as one of wrestling's most captivating villains, but WCW never truly got to showcase the full star power he brought to the table. These are the wrestlers who struggled after leaving WWF to join WCW. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Wrestling Sphere for more exciting content from the world of professional wrestling.